Okay, this is my next Transcendence review video. As I've said before, in my preview video, I said I would make reviews for each of my characters, so here we go. LP's Transcendence, as I kind of predicted in the preview, there isn't much to say about it. What he does get can be pretty good, but most of it doesn't need too much explaining. So hopefully this video is a little bit shorter. So let's get started. So Awakening Will. This passive in general just kind of adds on to what you should already be doing with LP. So Unawakened, it builds you more DP. Awakened, it allows you to deal more damage. That's pretty much the gist of this passive. The critical chance, critical damage, and maximize, I believe these get reduced to 5% later on, but that isn't too big of a deal. Getting extra resist when you're awakened can be pretty handy. After all, if you're me, you might get hit by a couple McMonta poisons. So let's move on to the other passive. So Amplify Energy. This thing has a lot of things. So let's go through them one by one. So armor combos now gain the ability to ignore guard. So that does 301. And when you do it like this, that does 409. So that's due to maximize more or less, but you can see that it ignores guard now. So this allows you to not worry so much about those times when you're doing a launching skill. You try to catch it with armor teleport, like the armor combo teleport, and for whatever reason it just doesn't and the mob knocks down. That's okay. You can just continue on doing the armor combos and you'll still get your damage. As well, you're able to bully shield mobs now with this, since their shields are also another form of guard. As well, I believe armor combos gain some critical chance now. I believe it's 15%. Yep, there you go. Wardbreaker. So Wardbreaker, the original Wardbreaker is now like 50% smaller, but now it has like 2 extra projectiles on top of it and below it that deal 25% of original Wardbreaker damage. So that means more or less you do 50% more damage with Wardbreaker now. As well, you gain an insane amount of MP, as you just saw right there. The raw damage now reaches above Psychic Storm with Enhanced Rate, which is probably its main competitor. The total damage is a little over 9k with 2 DMP awakened in the scenario that I just showed. At the wall, it does a little bit more, close to 9.5k, if not higher, simply because I believe it's called, the multi-hit black hole, the skill gets those hits in at the wall. Psychic Storm with critical trait, that's still vastly preferred over Wardbreaker. However, it will do similar damage when you factor in defense and guard, even after the critical trait nerf. I would hope so, at least. And in general, Psychic Storm just covers a lot more situations than Wardbreaker does. The payoff of Wardbreaker is certainly there with this passive, but the skill itself can still be a little bit sketchy to use. I'm looking into how I can use Wardbreaker in my PvE game, and perhaps this is like the funky little thing that I need to spice up LP a little bit for me. So far, it's been pretty good to me. So the next thing, I believe it's when you use Conquer Unawakened, you have a chance to gain mutation points. You can actually use this without any mutation points at the beginning. So you do this. Well, that was bad RNG. There we go. So that's 3. It's very rare you'll be below 3, to be quite honest, as LP, but that can still be useful. The gain seems to be per shot, it seems, so you can gain multiple mutation points per conqueror, as you just saw. The best I've gone is 5 once, so it's likely not limited. You could probably gain like all 6 mutation points if you really tried enough times. You can also awaken after Unawakened Conqueror, and you'll still get the DMP. So, like so. See, that was 4. Pretty good, right? As for the other bonuses, I believe it's, yep, Quick Buster slows down enemies, Pulse Cannon ignores guard, and the extra shots cost a little less. And EMP Shock, it's AoE and its effect get beefed up a little bit. If you aren't already using these skills, then these bonuses shouldn't really convince you to put them in. I'm not really sure why people use EMP Shock in PvE in the first place. Maybe they're just looking for a stereotypical AoE spam, but that's what Stasis is for, right? Overall, the main benefits from this passive are armor combos, Void Breaker, and Conqueror. Even then, all of these are only really usable in certain situations, albeit they can be important ones that OP can get himself into. Alright, so let's move on to skills here. So Silent Rush. So I think this skill is mainly meant for PvP. There isn't that much range on the hits. I believe if I can set it up right, this shouldn't, well, that's a little bit too far, but that's okay. That can just demonstrate how little the hit range is. It's about the visual, so keep that in mind. It also uses 1 DMP for pretty much paltry damage, extra damage, and so that DMP could be used for way more useful things. As an approach tool, which it may or may not be intended to be used for, it's still not as good as Quicksilver Cell, because Quicksilver Cell gathers mobs, even super armor mobs, while moving forward. This does not. So, as you saw, it doesn't move forward, it just stops. So overall, I don't think I can really advise using this skill. PvE at least. So yeah, just pass it. So the next skill, however, I can definitely recommend. The skill is reactive. It's called Dynamo Configuration Railgun. So the range on this thing is pretty hilarious. And to show it off, here's Quake Buster. Quake Buster's around here. Oh, I missed. There we go. And then Railgun's about here. It's pretty good. In fact, it's much longer than this, and to demonstrate that, let me get to an elder field. Alright, so here's Railgun. Alright, pretty far, right? So let's try the Awakened here. Same thing. For reference, here's Particle Shot. Pretty pathetic. Alright, let's get back to training mode here. Okay, so there are quite a few differences between Unawakened and Awakened Railgun. So if I use it Unawakened, I can't hit this monkey. If I do, I can. As well, you might have saw that Awakened makes me lose DP quite a bit. And to demonstrate that, give me a moment. Okay, so I have 5 monkeys set up. I can see it eats up DP like no tomorrow. However, when you use it Unawakened, it also builds just as much DP, if not more. Last thing is Awakened Railgun. It pierces infinitely, whereas Unawakened, you only get to hit 3 max, and the projectile just stops there. So, what if we could fuse the two together? What if we could have Awakened Railgun's hitbox and its infinite piercing, while gaining Unawakened's DP gain? There's a way to do that. If you space it out just right, so that Railgun, before it hits a mob in Awakened, you Unawaken. This distance is about like a screen off, purely because of its projectile speed. So let's see if I can do it. Like so. So if there's one thing I can suggest that you can have an easier time doing this, that if you double tap Awaken at the end of the animation while holding a moving key, you'll actually get it pretty consistently. Like so. That also prevents you from reawakening if like being able to reactivate Awaken mode is off cooldown. So overall, this active can be as potent as it is harmful. The minimal risk way to use this is to just use it unawakened and just gain the one one mutation point that it gives when you use it. So please don't give it. Good enough. Like so. And that's perfectly fine. To maximize it, however, you do have to take the risk and just try to fuse the strengths of both versions together. Alright, so last skill here. So that is Quicksilver Strike, this thing. So this is one of those times where my gut feelings about a skill are completely off once I start investigating it. Unfortunately, this is for the worse. So in terms of damage, the max number of hits I could get on this thing is 1 hit for the magnetic field, 1 hit, or not 1 hit, 13 hits on the multi-hit, as the tooltip calls it. I'm likely going to prefer it as the initial hits on the projectiles. 16 hits on the explosions, and then 1 hit on the shockwave. In total, that does about 9.1, 9.2k-ish, awakening with 3 mutation points. That means it does do comparable damage to your other 200 MP tiered tools, so that'd be Voidbreaker with the passive and Psychic Storm. However, the situation to get the max hits is insanely difficult. So the reason why is, well, I'll show it. When you do it point blank, you do about that much damage, right? So let's try it from a range perspective here. You can see that I do quite a bit more damage, or at least you can hear that I'm doing quite a bit more hits. And the reason why is because the explosion damage doesn't happen instantly. Instead, it happens after a certain distance. And that's mostly where your damage gained or lost is. As well, you also gain additional multi-hit, or as I'm going to call it, like an initial projectile damage at that same range where the explosions are. So that'll also be a factor. So that means if you're doing something point blank, it needs to be pushed back to the to the skill's edge where you're doing more damage. However, pushback distance can also be a factor, because if you have like water element on the mob, it'll actually get pushed back less, so you need to adjust it even further. For reference, after the element revamp, this will become poison as the thing that reduces pushback distance. This thing can't push back super armor, so it's almost as bad as point blank Voidbreaker on a super armor mob. If you can do the super armor thing, please. There you go. Alright, so on top of that, this thing has a bunch of limitations. When you use it like on like a platform edge like this, mobs will actually fall out of the punches, and the projectiles will just completely whiff. As well, the magnet field, it won't hit mobs on a platform. So if I do the basic approach here, no good. And you can see that the projectiles also have a hard time hitting platforms as well. The magnet field can hit mobs on a platform, but they have to be mobs that kind of lower their hurt boxes more than normal. So the best thing I can think of is like shadow borders, but again, it's very rare. So that means with all these restrictions that Quicksilver Strike, you have to use it on the same elevation. Overall, the skill is in a pretty similar situation with Voidbreaker, where if something's super armored, you have to space it out correctly. If there's no super armor involved, you can just use it willy-nilly. However, it's really hard to get a good amount out of the skill, because you need the mobs to be at a certain distance, and they also need to be at the same elevation for your best damage, and that can be tough to achieve. I mean, you do have Quicksilver Excel to kind of try to force the situation, but why not just use Psychic Storm at that point, right? Corners can be your best friend or your worst enemy with the skill. It can be your best friend because it can give you correct spacing or optimal damage. It could be your worst enemy because it could give you the spacing where the explosion damage whiffs. So if you don't think you're positioned right, you have to reposition with LP. And LP doesn't exactly like to do repositioning, let's just say. You will have to end up sacrificing damage on multiple mobs, since the best spacing is near the edge of the skill, and usually multiple mobs, they're probably like at various ranges in relation to you. The payout for like even getting this skill to work, it just isn't worth it. Like, Voidbreaker has a lot more payout even with its issues, so I can like try to live with it and try to see how I can make it work, but this not so much. Personally, I won't use the skill, but after looking at it, I don't think I'll exactly like moan and groan if I see any LP and PvE use it. I would like to point out, however, that it's very unlikely that any LP that uses Quicksilver Strike in PvE is getting their money's worth out of it. Maybe if like the punches were bigger, or they pushed back super armor, as in like the projectiles, or if the explosion damage like happened at the same time as the initial hit damage, kind of like Quick Buster, like just anything to make this skill a little bit less picky. Alright, so summary. Overall, LP's Transcendence kinda just allows him to continue doing what he's been doing better, rather than giving him anything really new. Passives, they pretty much highlight that, because Awaken Mode just beats up your stats, and Amplified Energy just beats up current utilities, rather than really giving them new things. I guess the one exception would be Voidbreaker, because it got beefed up so much that you can consider it to be a new tool in your arsenal if you want to give it a shot. Railgun, the active, when you use it correctly, it'll just build you the DP to stay in Awaken Mode faster and longer. As well, it also helps with building mutation points, so that it just allows you to keep on going. Sound Rush, probably not meant for PvE. Quicksilver Strike, I mean, it does have potential. However, I find it very hard to convince anyone to use this over Voidbreaker or Psychic Storm. Sometimes, even when you put in the work into like trying to optimize skills, sometimes the payoff still isn't worth the work into it. However, it's still good to discover and kind of understand skills even if you aren't going to use them. Because, well, now you understand why I won't be using Quicksilver Strike, right? So, thanks for watching and listening like always. I guess that'll be it for this video. Alright, take care.